Good morning, lasses and laddies. We are in Northumberland, England, and we are at the Bamburgh Castle here. Come down from Edinburgh from the northwest to have a wee look at this bonny castle. Bonny? Well, we are here to see the castle, that's for sure. I don't know about bonny, but I guess it is bonny. But yes, we are here. This was Northumbria, going back 1,000+ years. And Uhtred was here. There was an Uhtred. You've seen the movie The Last Kingdom, right? And Outlander, I think actually Outlander was shot right here. I think they portrayed it in Outlander as the jail. And then inside, in The Last Kingdom, right, Uhtred, they had the royal court of Alfred, but it wasn't Alfred actually back then. It was Ethelred the Unready. And anyway, aside from the shooting here, there is a real Uhtred. He was called Uhtred the Bold, and we're going to talk about him. So we're going to walk. We're not going to be able to go inside. No drone shooting, so if you have a drone, don't be coming here trying to shoot your drone. I was hoping I could do that. But that said, we're going to walk on the outside of the castle. We're going to look at the cemetery, the graveyard, and there's some things to talk about there. And also out here, they found a family plot from the royal house of Northumbria. Let's take a look and I'll show you where they found, and it's just breathtaking, by the way, here. The views and the dunes and the beach. Just look at that. Yeah, down there they found, not too long ago, a graveyard, a cemetery of this royal house of Northumbria. Over 100 bodies were excavated. And they have a museum inside. And in the museum, they've displayed a lot of those bodies. So we're going to talk about the real Uhtred and the Bold and what he did and when it happened and all that. So I'm a little early, and I wanted to get here before the horde. There's even a big school program coming today, so I'm glad we did. But once they open the gates right here, in about 15 minutes, we are going to be in, and we'll talk about all of this. All right, gang, we made it to the castle. We are inside, and it's pretty windy up here. So yeah, the original castle you see here, this is all stone. The original castle was wood, and of course it housed all the villagers, all the people, many of them inside. And if there was a problem, then everybody would come inside for protection. The cannons weren't here, of course, back then. It wasn't like this originally. So let's go back to the mid-6th century, Anglo-Saxon days. King Either of Northumbria, his grandson, King Athelfrith, would give it to Queen Beba, and it's this area, that's how they came up with the name Bamburgh. The region was eventually conquered by the Vikings, and then it was under Dane law. And under Dane law in the 10th century, it was Uhtred's father, the real Uhtred, who controlled this castle. In the year 995, Uhtred the Bold, as he was known, was 70 miles south of here in Durham. And that's where he would marry the daughter of the Bishop of Durham. And now he was rich. So he would come back here to Bamburgh, and in the year 1006, problems would start. Again, the Scotch king Malcolm II came to raid, and they had a battle. But Uhtred gathered his army and fought off the invaders. And the King of England, who was King Ethelred, and they called him King Ethelred the Unready. And we'll talk about that because it's a good term. He was unready. And they came in and they wreaked havoc. And Ethelred the Unready, he had to flee to exile. Was not prepared. Of course, as time went on, Uhtred would be pulled back and forth between England and the Danes. He had to switch sides a lot, just like in the series, The Last Kingdom. Now, in the year 1013, there was a more massive invasion by the Danes, attacking England. And King Ethelred the Unready would end up losing it all and have to flee and live in exile, as I mentioned. Uhtred had no choice but to submit. But then the new Danish king leader died just a couple of months after arriving in London. So Ethelred returned to England, and Uhtred shifted his alliance back. And now in the year 1016, Uhtred was far away fighting for England when the Danish king Canute attacked and took over the area here, including this castle. And Uhtred could not get back in time to occupy it. So again, he planned to change sides, and he was going to pledge his loyalty to the Danish king. But Canute feared him, and he wouldn't let that happen. So he arranged for a group of clandestine murderers to come, and they actually, with Uhtred's men, they murdered them all. So Uhtred never made it back here. Unfortunately, the real Uhtred the Bold. And that's the story of what really went on here in the Last Kingdom, right? This Last Kingdom. Now, interestingly, this whole fortress, it basically evolved into stone from wood. And this was the only fortress to dramatically fall during a siege where they used artillery, and they just destroyed the whole side of this in a siege. So I'm going to walk down to the cemetery. We have to find the cemetery. Oh, look at the keep. That neat? Yeah, quite a dramatic place here, guys. All right, let's go find the graveyard. The castle in the distance, there it is. We have found the churchyard. And it's just on the outskirts of the small town here. And as we pan to the left, we see the medieval church. It's called St. Aidan. And this is St. Aidan Churchyard. Very interesting story here of someone. And in that church, you see those stained glass windows. We're going to talk about those. But we're going to walk to her grave. It's a very interesting monument and an intriguing monument of her lying in state. Her name, Grace Horsley Darling. She was born here on November 24th, 1815. She was the seventh of 9 children. She had 4 brothers and 4 sisters. Her father, his name was William Darling. He was the lighthouse keeper here, just off the coast on these islands. Rocky formations just offshore here. They lived on one of the islands, Brownsman Island, in a small cottage attached to the lighthouse. It's still there today, but the lighthouse, most of that is gone. But Grace spent her youth in various lighthouses with her father. It was in her blood. There would be an event here that would unfold that would change her life, and it would change the lives of many. It was 4:45 on an early morning in September of 1838. And Grace, she was in her bedroom, and she happened to wake up early and look out the window, and in the dim morning light she spotted what turned out to be the wreck of a paddle steamer. It was a ship that was on the rocks across the nearby low rocky island called Big Harcar Rock. And there it was on the shore, heaving. It was only half a ship, and I thought she saw people. She couldn't believe her eyes. But yes, there it was, rocking on the shore in tatters. The ship, its name was Forfarshire. It had run aground. There was still a raging storm going on, and during the storm the ship's engine had failed, and there were 60 people aboard that ship, crew, passengers, men, women, and children. And they were all helpless at the mercy of the violent pitching ocean. We approach the monument that I was talking about, and you'll see the effigy of Grace there lying in state. It's a beautiful medieval crafted monument with the arches and columns, the spiral carvings. And this actual original effigy, I believe, is in the church. I could not get in the church, but we'll have some pictures. But that effigy is not the original because the original was deteriorating, but it's just a beautiful piece of work as we zoom in. So what happened? Well, Grace and her father, without thinking of their own safety in those rough seas, they took a rowboat, and Grace was doing a lot of the rowing and guiding of the boat. And they went there and they rescued 9 survivors, and they would row them all back in 2 trips, actually. One of the survivors was a woman. She was in a state of shock, still holding her 2 drowned children. Well, on the second trip, her father went, and Grace stayed in the lighthouse to nurse the first load of survivors. And there they all had to stay for 3 days. The storm was raging, it got worse, and they all had a shelter for 3 days until they could go back to the mainland. When it was all over, Grace was a national heroine throughout the United Kingdom. Her deeds were committed to verse and poems and in books, and she was very, very famous. Sadly, just under 4 years after the famous rescue, in the spring of 1842, Grace became ill with tuberculosis while she was visiting the mainland here. And within months, she died. It was on October 20th. She was only 26. What a beautiful effigy this is, monument. There are stained glass windows in the church of her, commemorating her, and I will show those images. Rest in peace, Grace Darling.